Welcome to the Project DIY Hunter Podcast. If you're thinking about hunting DIY, or if you've been hunting DIY for a long time, this podcast is for you. We invite you to join us as we seek to gain knowledge to continue to be successful DIY hunters. Thanks for listening and enjoy the podcast. So what is up, everybody? Thank you for getting back in for another episode of Project DIY Hunter Podcast. Today, we're going to be talking to Hickory Haven Fawn Rescue. She started this about 2 years ago, and she's passionate about getting these fawns and getting them back into the wild where they need to be. So, Ericka, how are you?
Good. How are you doing?
Doing well. I guess we want to start out by asking some questions. I know this question probably gets asked a lot, but so I found a fawn. So what do I do now that I found one?
So what we say in South Carolina is that when you find a fawn, we want people to immediately look up the South Carolina Deer Rehabbers Registry and contact someone on that list in your county. That way we can get it the care it needs immediately versus keeping it in your house for a long time or trying to feed it things. We also recommend that people don't feed it anything, but just hurry up and get it the care it needs. If you do get in a situation where you cannot get it to a approved DNR rehabber in a timely manner, the only thing we recommend is Pedialyte. You can give it Pedialyte to drink if it will drink that. And the reason behind that is fawn have very delicate digestive systems, and we spend a lot of time trying to fix what people were trying to do out of kindness when we get the deer and we need to get it on fawn milk replacer.
Right. So the deer is not always abandoned. When you see the deer by itself, that's really just the mom going and feeding, and they leave the fawn in what they think is a safe area. So the fawn may not always be abandoned, right?
Right. And so there's a couple things that we recommend you look for. So curled ears on the tips of the ears is a big thing. A lot of people think that's the only thing you need to look at. Oh, it has curled ears. Let's rush it away from its mom. No, so that could just be how the deer is. We want there to be multiple reasons why you would pick up this fawn from the wild. So is it laying on its side? Is it crying? Is it walking around bleating and looking for food? Is it coming up to you physically and like suckling on you? Is it covered in flies? That's a big one. If there's flies on it, that means that the mother has not been around to clean it up, to get those flies off, and that it's so tired that it can't get the flies off itself. So really it's a combination of things that we look for, not just, oh, there's a fawn, its ears are curled, I'm going to take it.
Right. So now I found the fawn, and I think that, that the mother has abandoned it. Do I bring the fawn to you, or do I call you?
So it's best if you call, because sometimes we'll come out and it's really still not abandoned. We'll check out the situation, and maybe the mother is just not a good mom and it's been gone too long. The goal is definitely to reunite it with the doe if possible. It is a myth that it cannot be reunited. The doe does not care if you picked it up.
Right. I also was listening to a podcast earlier. It sounded like it was overseas somewhere, England maybe, and that's what they were saying, that is, if you touch the deer, the mom will never come back around it anymore. What you're saying is that that's not true.
We've done it. We've picked him up. We've moved him around, and the doe comes back like nothing happened. So just in our experience, it doesn't matter. I think with other species of animals, it might matter more, but no, we haven't seen that as an issue.
Right. So once you get the fawn to the rehabilitation center, what do you do then? I know you feed it stuff, or you feed it Pedialyte and try to get it back together.
Yeah.
But what do you do, and how long does that normally take to get them back to the wild?
So a couple things. One, it depends on the condition that we pick the fawn up. We do triage. So triage would be if it's been bit by a dog, which is very common, picked up by any sort of animal, hit by a car, picked up. We've had them picked up by an owl before. So they're puncture wounds in general, anything that's abrasive. Um, we do first aid basically. So we make sure that the fawn gets subcutaneous fluids, IV fluids. We make sure that it gets antibiotics if it needs it for open wounds. We treat maggots way more than we'd like. We clean that up, get those out of there. Um, and then we also give it special veterinary drugs. So we give it steroids for inflammation. There's a whole list of things that we do to triage that deer that may be on the verge of death. If they come in healthy, it's just a matter of getting a weight, making sure that they're drinking milk replacer, and getting them the vitamins that they need to be in captivity for a brief time.
So what age can they start living in the wild on their own?
Sure. So we like the spots to be off before we put them back in the wild. That's a good indicator. So spots come off about month 4 and 5. So when they're 5 months old, they're pretty much ready to go back into the wild, because the whole time we're rehabbing them, we're not touching them, we're not playing with them, we're not taming them down, because we want them to have that best chance of success. And the longer they're in captivity, the worse it can get. So definitely, I like to release mine at month when they're 5 or 6 months old, because it gives them a chance to just get out in the wild, and start being deer.
Right. Do you ever see them become too used to being around humans to where you can't really release them back into the wild?
Yeah, absolutely. That is a big problem in South Carolina, not just in rehab, but the public. So if you handle a fawn too much while you're rehabbing, you run the risk of it never being able to be in the wild. And when that happens, there's very few white-tailed deer sanctuaries in South Carolina. You have to have permits. You have to have special constructed fence. It's very strict. So we have to sanctuary those deer, and every single deer needs 900 square foot of space minimum.
Oh,
So that starts to add up quickly. Um, when there's too many deer that have been tamed down based on either bad rehab or the public taming them down.
right. So how many do you see, I guess, in this Greenville area come in every year? Is it pretty consistent about the same number, or does it fluctuate year by year?
So that's been very interesting. We a couple years ago, we weren't seeing very many. There'd be one or two a year, like, oh, here's a pet deer that needs to be picked up, or oh, here's a piebald that actually, made it to adulthood. Now we're seeing so many more because of social media. People are posting their pet deer, and then other people are tagging us, and it just never stops. I think this year alone, I've been tagged in probably 15 pet fawn posts. And as we head into fall, it's going to turn into being tagged in pet deer
Yeah.
posts. So that, I think last year there was 6 or 7 pet deer that were either turned over or confiscated, and that's a lot when you don't have that kind of space in the
Right.
sanctuaries.
And I don't think a lot of people know that actually keeping a pet deer is actually illegal. Like you can't do that.
Exactly. It is a misdemeanor to keep a white-tailed deer in captivity in South Carolina without permit, and they don't just give permits out to anybody. So, um, and some people, this is a hot topic because people say, well, why can't I keep it? I have a farm, I have fence. Well, you've tamed it down, and now it becomes a dangerous animal. It could be potentially dangerous, whether it's a doe or a buck. A buck could get aggressive during rut on people's kids. They get aggressive on other animals. If there's a doe, it can still get aggressive bucks coming after it during rut,
Right.
which then puts your whole family in that sort of risk mode where people are killed by whitetail occasionally.
Yeah. Before I hit the record button, we were talking about experience that I had. I got a buddy that actually had a pet deer. Their family had a pet deer for a long time, and the niece actually went down into the fence, the high fence they had the deer in, to clean out the hooves of this deer, and the deer did not like that. because she's seen
Mm-hmm.
them do that to the horses, so she wanted to go down there and do it to the deer. And the deer pawed her and pounced on her. And luckily, we were out there, and I kind of looked
Yeah.
through the fence, and I'm like, "Man, what is that? What is happening?" And ran down there, and got between her and the deer, got her out of there. But both of us come out with some knots on our head and arm and
Oh
shoulders.
yeah.
It's no joke.
So when I volunteer at Magnolia Fawn Rescue, the main sanctuary in upstate South Carolina, um, she has a permitted whitetail deer in her sanctuary, and they range from genetic defects to pet deer. And the pet deer are the worst. They will attack you while you're trying to feed them because they've been trained to do that. People have said, "Oh, come get the food, come get the snacks." They will strike you with their hooves if they don't get what they want because they're basically big dogs at that point. Um, so we have to restrict volunteers to not go in. People can't go in there unless they're experienced to feed the deer because they will strike you. Most of them are super friendly, but there's a couple that they're not the nicest because of how people have treated
Right.
them.
And they're still
Um,
wild animals.
yeah, and all of the deer are castrated. You cannot have deer reproducing in sanctuary.
But you don't castrate them before you let them go.
No, so that's just for deer that we cannot release back
Right.
into the wild. They get
Right.
castrated. We can't. If you castrate a deer, you really can't release it back to the wild.
Right. How long have you been doing this?
So I've been rescuing fawn for 2 years, and I've been
Okay.
volunteering for 3 years. So I'm really fairly new to this, but just jumped in feet first and learned a lot of connections, a lot of great people in this program.
Yeah, I'm sure there's so many people just willing to help new people come in and do this.
Yeah, we're definitely a tight knit group. There's a class that's held every year at Magnolia Fawn Rescue for those who are interested in doing this, and that's really the key: is um, paying attention in class, making sure that you're doing everything to keep the animals safe and healthy and ready to be released into the wild. The goal is never to make them pets if we can help it, because we just simply don't have the room for it.
Yeah. So what's some of your biggest challenges in fawn rehab? What do you have to do to make your place perfect for the deer and get these
Mhm.
permits and where you're allowed to house these deer?
So deer are complicated and fragile and expensive. Those are the three things that I try to tell people when they're like, "Oh, I can do this." Uh, our fencing is double lined with netting to make sure that predators can't get in. Make sure that dogs can't dig under it, stray dogs. So our fencing is very expensive and it was very time consuming to put up. Uh, the medications that are required for the deer are also very expensive. Vet visits are complicated and expensive as well. I mean, you've got a wild exotic animal, right? Trying to get it medical attention. Um, I would say the biggest challenge is that deer are always looking for ways to die. So no matter what you do, no matter how good you are, you're always going to have that one fawn that just fails to thrive. And it's frustrating. You're like trying to figure it out. You're getting on conference calls with veterinarians. You're calling everybody. Like it's not thriving. So we have to accept that. We have to accept that sometimes there's a reason that the mother doe abandoned the deer and that sometimes they just cannot be rehabilitated.
Wow. Yeah. So, I see these costs that you have. The estimate each adult deer seized by DNR costs
Mhm.
10,000 to feed and medical bills in their lifetime, and that's a lot of money.
Yeah. Deer eat more than goats, more than horses. Um, Magnolia Fawn Rescue, the one with the sanctuary, she goes through 1,000 pounds of feed a month, maybe
Wow.
more, trying to feed these deer, and they eat a lot.
Yeah.
So
So, what kind of role and what kind of partnership do you have with DNR?
this program is DNR's program. The reason we're allowed to rehabilitate whitetail fawn is because DNR allows it. But I do believe we have a partnership with them, especially this year. It's been fantastic. Dispatch has supported us when we are getting pet deer reported. They're sending officers out to check it out. They're calling us in when it's necessary. When we go on an adult deer call, they're there to assess the situation and keep us safe. So I truly appreciate our relationship with DNR and expect that it's only going to get better from here.
Yeah, that's awesome. Because you know how hunters support DNR.
Mm-hmm.
By buying license and tags and different stuff. So it's nice that our money is going to help and fund a program like this.
Yeah, definitely shout out to the Anderson, Greenville, Pickens County's officers. They've been great.
So I've heard you reference these piebalds. Can you tell us more about what these are?
Sure. Um, so you wouldn't think there'd be so many piebalds in the wild, but a piebald is a deer that has a genetic defect that causes it to be partially white and brown, completely white, or mostly brown with splotches of white. They also are born. They may be beautiful, but they have a lot of problems. So a lot of times they're short-bodied. Something is wrong with them internally. They can be born with quad hooves in the back. They can be born with stuff missing. They're troublesome. So uh, the Department of Natural Resources does not want piebalds really in the population of deer because they're not healthy genetics, even though they are rare looking. So the piebalds definitely have a special place in our heart when we can manage to rehab them and sanctuary them. It is nice to do so, but many times they do not live. Um, we have seen an outstanding number of piebalds this year. I would say we're over 25 piebalds that I've seen recorded rescued this year, and very few of them have lived. So that's how many people are either finding them or does are abandoning them because they know there's something wrong.
Yeah, I have definitely seen a couple of them. I haven't seen many, but I've seen some around this area here. But yeah, so
Something about this area, this we not to point out to the hunters where the piebalds are, but we think they're Abbeville County, Pickens County. Um, that's where we're seeing them. It is remarkable to me. It just seems like that's where all those calls are coming from. And Lyman has a couple calls as well.
yeah, so I did want to address that too. Because I mean, this is a fawn rescue episode on a hunting podcast.
Right, right.
Um, so us as hunters, if we don't work to sustain the deer population, then the sport that we love so much will no longer exist. We're not out there trying to make deers extinct. We're not out there to
Hmm.
shoot a lot of deers in one season. We play by the rules, and there's rules are there for a reason. The DNR, should know what they're doing. They know what they're doing. So
Hmm.
whenever they put these limits on this kind of stuff, there's a reason for that. Um, it's nice for people like you to go in and rescue these small deer, so they have that they can experience
Hmm.
life in the wild like a normal deer, and then maybe one day they can grow up and get big and then feed my family.
Hmm. Yeah, so I'll talk a little bit about my experience with releasing the fawns as adult whitetails. So I released seven last year on my property outside of Belton, all very wild, thriving. And I release during hunting season because the deer I'm releasing are, I would hope, not big enough for anybody to shoot. I want to get them out of captivity so they can start to thrive in the wild. Not everybody agrees with that. But just the other day, I saw all seven that I released in the wild. They kind of sneak around my property a little bit. I'll catch them out of the corner of my eye. They're coming up and eating the corn feeders just like a wild deer. So it is nice to see my methods working. And I will say these deer are just now 1 year old, and they have got very nice racks on them already. They already have they're forkies already,
Wow.
which surprised me. I was like, wow, here's this tiny malnourished deer that I took in, and now it's the king of the forest.
Yeah.
That's going to bring great genetics.
Yeah, and that's one thing. Us hunters, we're not out there trying to shoot the young deer. We're out there
Mm-hmm.
looking for the older deer. We pride ourselves in shooting the big old buck. That
Mm-hmm.
probably don't have much longer. to live in
Right.
the wild. Their
Mhm.
teeth are wearing down. Their life expectancy. What is a deer's life expectancy?
So I'm not entirely sure in the wild. I would say 3 to 5 years, but in captivity they live a very long time, so they
Yeah,
could live up to 15 years.
yeah,
Not saying that that last bits of life for them would be great, but they can live a long time. But in the wild, absolutely not. I read the 2020 deer report for South Carolina, and there's something like 19 deer per square mile in Anderson County right now. So populations are up, but that means more competition for food, more deer getting
right,
hit by cars. So I think it's more important than ever to keep those fawn healthy and get them back into the population, so that the best genetics will win out.
right. So yeah, so I think we can go ahead and start wrapping it up. I really do appreciate you taking the time to get on this podcast and talk about what is obviously very important to you, and to us hunters too. I mean, like I said, if it wasn't for people taking care of these animals, then we wouldn't have nothing to go hunt with our dad or with
Mm-hmm.
our brother, or spend those awesome experiences together. Um, but yeah, so where can people find Hickory Haven Fawn Rescue, and where can they donate to help, the cause that's so important to you?
Sure. So we are a 501c3 nonprofit. So all the donations are tax deductible. You can find us on our website at hickoryhavenfawnrescue.com, Instagram at Hickory Haven Fawn Rescue, and Facebook at Hickory Haven Fawn Rescue. So it's basically all the same. We do have a TikTok, but it's not very popular. Uh, so any donation through Facebook, PayPal, Venmo, you can find that information on our Facebook, Instagram, and website. We certainly appreciate any and all donations. Every dollar goes directly to fawn care, and helping us get through the season, paying for all those expensive little babies.
That's awesome. Yeah. So once again, thank you for your time. So thanks everybody for listening. Appreciate it. Also, don't forget to go check out projectdiyhunter.com, our Facebook. Go like the page. We got Instagram, TikTok. We have new YouTube videos out. Go subscribe, hit the bell so you get notifications. I really do appreciate it. So there's going to be a lot coming up. So make sure you subscribe and so you can get these notifications and check it out. So yeah, appreciate you listening. Check you next time. And go Tigers.